Okay, so welcome to my audience. So this is Vantage Point Conversations, where I get to ask loads of questions. I get to dig into topics that I either know about or I know nothing about. Open up my mind, and yeah, generally get to meet some great people and ask some good questions. So my guest today is Karina. I have no idea how to say your surname, so please help me out.
So thank you so much, first of all, for having me over in this interesting space where I think it's clue to kind of have this very genuine conversation over topics that sometimes either get invisible because they're too complex, and sometimes they get overcomplicated because of the wording. So I'm very happy to have a space where we can just naturally talk about things. So my family name is a French family name, so you pronounce it Lagarrigue when you pronounce it in French. Well, Spanish people would say Lagarrigue, and they double R like that. So the most common English pronunciation I've heard is Lagarrigue. So
Okay.
you can go with whatever
Yeah.
helps you best to pronounce it.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, do you want to? I always say this is my opening monologue, Karina. I'd never introduce my guests purely. It's not being lazy. I just don't think I would do a very good job of it. So, if you just wouldn't mind spending as long as you want, as short time, as long time as you want, just to explain anything about you, highs, lows, any context you think you would like people to know about you, and then we just dive into the conversation from there.
But thank you for that. Actually, something I always find quite interesting when I go to conferences is that they always initiate those presentations, right, with all the titles, like where you got your degrees and where you went from there and what you're currently doing and things like that. And I actually feel that it puts that wall between me and the people, and it makes actually the conversation even harder because then they see me like on over all these different layers of yeah of bureaucracy, so to say. And I like to say that especially one question that I find very difficult to answer is where are you from? And so I like to answer like, well, I'm a human being. And if I had to introduce myself, I always start with that. I'm a human being that happened to be highly mobile during my developmental years. So I happened to experience expatriation and mobility from a very young age, and it has somehow shaped both the way I am as a person, as a mother. I'm a mother of two TCKs as well. So TCKs comes for third quarter kid, and that is kind of the result of developing in these highly mobile environments and also in this multicultural environment. And we're seeing that it is becoming this much more normal reality. And I was a highly mobile TCK. My children became TCKs themselves because I'm married to a Catalan, and he has this different cultural background, linguistics, and so on. But we happen to be highly mobile during their first developmental years as well. So I'm a mother, and I'm the mother of two TCKs that happen to be neurodivergent as well. So I would say I'm this kind of person that has a life that I would say at some point was very fancy and at the same time very misunderstood. And that at this moment is becoming much more normal, like it's something that many of us are experiencing one way or another. Either we are in a multicultural relationship, or we're experiencing mobility due to work opportunities, or we happen to have an international adoptee at home because adaptation, for example, adaptation, is that what you say? Adopting
Yeah,
children
yeah,
is becoming more and more something that people are perhaps more open on doing, and the borders and all the bureaucracy behind it, it has also kind of became more agile. So I am at this kind of perfect intersection of experiencing global mobility myself and having experienced it as a child as well, and having this background in psychology that helps me to understand and to somehow process also many things that I've gone through from a different perspective. And I'm currently actually bringing the challenges to light to different communities. I would say I am, of course, focusing on the mental health providers that I specialize in, and that I do think that my clinical experience as a psychologist supporting multicultural couples and highly mobile individuals has also given me this sense of kind of community, right? This feeling that is not only me and my little particular experience, it's like we are the whole community experiences those challenges. And I do think that it's urgent that people start acknowledging them. And of course, those that are perhaps manipulating the most vulnerable parts of some people's stories, which is this psychological support, I think are the one that really need to understand how to approach it. But then it kind of spreads everywhere. I was told the other day that I am that kind of person that is all over the place. And I was like, yeah, is that what mobility looks like? Like you're everywhere, like you're literally everywhere, you're all over the place. So understanding that mobility has that impact in all these different layers of complexity, of how you define yourself, how you move, how you relate to things, how you perhaps just answer to the question, where are you from? It's something that to me is becoming very important. And I would say that kind of resume like a little bit where I come from and what I ended up doing that is literally directly related.
I love it. So you've given me lots of places to jump off with. The first one I'd say is, I love your opening. First of all, I'm a human being, because immediately when you said that, something clicked inside me, and I was like, oh, what a way to connect. Because like you said about titles, everything disappears. I'm not a title, I'm a human being. And then someone in front of you would just go, oh, well, I'm a human being as well, so I can talk to you. And this topic of titles is something that I think we could probably dig into, but that's maybe a conversation for another day. I'm not a fan of titles. I think, I scroll through LinkedIn all the time trying to connect with people, and like some days I'm just absolutely bewildered by the titles that people have called themselves or been given, and sometimes it's actually like, oh, well, I won't speak to you because of that title. And it's this really weird barrier that I think we put them there, and we think it's going to create some sort of either connection, but oftentimes it creates a big barrier, and maybe we want barriers, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's a topic for for another day. But I selfishly, I wanted to have this conversation. Like all the lives that I do, I speak to my guests beforehand to make sure it's okay for you to talk and we can find the topic. But it's actually a subject that I've never really given any consideration to. However, so why I never gave it any consideration, I come from the corporate world. I worked for a lot of, a few banks, and they had global offices. And so I spent most of my career in London, worked there, and worked for one of the banks that had, global sites. And mobility was just one of those things. You'd find a new manager or a leader. It was mainly leadership roles where people would come in from other countries, or they would be sent somewhere else. And I never gave it any thought. I just thought, oh, okay, that's it. I think how I would have seen it was, oh, we've got a new manager, they're not going to understand me now, I've got to go through the whole process again. However, just over 10 years ago, I moved from the UK to Luxembourg. And I did that because my partner at the time, she was German, and she worked in Luxembourg. So I said, oh, okay. She was in the UK, and I said, oh, I'll give going to Luxembourg a go. I really struggled at the beginning. It was quite something. It was effectively, I turned my world upside down, and it was all my decision. But there was a lot in that, and I never really gave it any consideration. But if you've ever been to Luxembourg, it's quite international. There's so many people there's a lot of German, French, Luxembourgers who are obviously, it's their country, people from Belgium, and they're quite close borders, so a lot of people travel in. But then you get a lot of people from Spain, from Italy, and a whole host of other countries coming in. And I remember being pretty scared, like being in Luxembourg, So I started a brand new job in a new company. Everyone was super nice. I was just shitting myself. Like, honestly, just I didn't speak the language. Still don't, by the way. It's an English thing. We can dig into that. And I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know anything. I couldn't comfortably go into restaurants. Everything was new, and it's not like changing jobs in the UK from one company to another. This was literally everything. And at this point in time, I was with my girlfriend. She was super supportive. She made everything so much easier, and my transition here was so much smoother because of her. But I'd left my family, my routine, my friends, everything I'd known for. So we're talking 10. So I was 36-ish at the time. I thought that I was going to grow up where I was born. I was going to find someone within a 2-meter radius and get married. And then life changed. And it was all my decision. It wasn't forced upon me. But I looked around at other people, and there were people in the companies that I worked at that had come from other countries. Sometimes some of the big managers had done tours in different countries. Asia was often one of those. I don't know if I'm not quite sure why Asia is one of those places that they send most managers anyway. And I thought, why am I the only one feeling scared? Like, I mean, I wasn't sitting there trembling, unable to work. I could do my job, and I could do it very well. The problem was I'd come from a culture in London where it was quite cutthroat. It was, sort of, you had to work, you had to produce, we were working in big teams. And then I came to Luxembourg, and where I was working, the culture was very different. They took their lunches. You didn't really come in early, you didn't leave late. And there was a lot of adjusting, and I was hoping that the world would adjust to me, but I had to adjust to it. And so I never gave it any thought. And I thought about it when it happened, but I haven't given it any thought until we had that conversation about how that's going to work for all those managers. Because, again, I've seen managers in companies in Luxembourg, and they seem to just get it all okay. But then when we spoke last week, I was like, oh, maybe they're scared. They're just not able to talk about it with anyone. And I think because of these type of roles, etc., leadership and management, etc., it almost comes with an unwritten rule that you have to be strong, or you can't show vulnerability. I've never really seen it. And the more conversations I have with people on LinkedIn, often one of the things that I talk about is what isn't really talked about much on here, especially around leadership. And a lot of topics come around loneliness and being able to connect with people. And I was like, oh, okay. And that wasn't around mobility. That was just in the leadership part of things. But that must be hugely enhanced when someone's coming from another country to a country. They've got to set up camp. Some people are there they know that they're either there for 6 months, a year, 3 years, or whatever, and that's generally in their contract. They've got to perform, they've got to make friends, they've got to settle their family in, if they've got kids, if they haven't, there's a whole load of things to consider. And I never really considered that of like how these managers were. So I've said a lot. I'm not expecting you to answer every single one of those things, but it's such a fascinating topic. And where do you sort of jump in? Do people come across you does a leader reach out to you and say that they want to talk about it, or do you go into companies to help people integrate, or how does your work sort of come into play?
So first of all, I think you just introduced a personal experience that very much explained a lot of why it is so important to see case by case. Like you presented a scenario where you were moving, right? But in a scenario where the first thing that you highlighted, and you highlighted different times, it was you had the support, and your transition was better or smoother because of that support. And not everybody has that support. Not everybody is moved around the globe with a support network, or not even with a companion, let alone with a person that is feeling supported, her or himself. Like 70% of the cases is a spouse, is a woman that is going to be going with the international leader or professional that is being relocated. But sometimes it's also the man, and independently on the gender, like there is this lack of awareness on the role of that spouse that is gonna be there supporting the transition, having a huge impact in the adaptation process, and therefore in their performance. So I do think that you pointed out as something that is super invisible still, and is the role of those spouses on those people that are there and that are an important role in the role that has been selected, like the leadership position, the specialist position, you name it, right? Then you said that you didn't speak the language, and that just adds another complexity to this scenario, right? Sometimes we are transferred to a country where we may speak the language, but we may experience a culture shock anyways, like with other things that you were saying, like the culture, how do we do things, how do we handle conflict, how do we lead with pressure, like all these things are going to be changing. But if on the top of that you add in the layer of not speaking the language, having to find a way to communicate what is going on for you, or so on and so forth, it just adds another layer of complexity. So the situations that I accompany are each of them very different to one another, but they have at the core what we started talking about. They have a human being. They have a human being that is naturally wired to be psychosocial, right? And to be biologically sensitive. So we are going to be impacted by mobility, wanting it or not. Now, you just pointed out something super important, is that the way these mobility, these transitions, these challenges that we're talking about, the lack or not lack of support, the challenge of a new language or not, the change perhaps of industry, because not everybody is just transferred as a specialist. Sometimes you're taking the risk and jumping into a new position and having completely new challenges and completely new roles, right? Like depending on all those variables, your experience is going to be one way or another. And the most importantly is to understand that it's going to impact you, even if it's a tiny, teeny bit. Because something that we've seen with the studies of global mobility is that even what we call domestic relocation has an impact. Because even if you moved from London to, I'm just inventing it here, to Liverpool, even if they both speak English, believe me, I've been living in Liverpool. English in Liverpool is quite different. And their customs and their habits and how they do things will change. So even domestic mobility, and when you take countries as big as Brazil, for instance, the differences and the contrasts are going to be even bigger, because it will even take the length of climate impact. Like the weather is going to be drastically different depending on what part you're living in. So it is super important to understand that we're not immune to mobility. And it doesn't matter how well prepared you are. It doesn't matter how long your title is. And it doesn't matter how long your career has been, how many years you've been in that role. It has impacted you. Actually, what I see is that those leaders that have been in this constant relocation and global mobility have just somehow normalized this survival mode of their brain. And as you were saying before, you were fully functioning. It was not something that you were not able to function or to do your job or to deliver. You are. But the cost that it's having on your body as a human being is invisible many times. First of all, to yourself. Like you're not aware. As you were saying before, I never stopped to think about, oh yeah, I relocated. And I relocated to a country that I don't speak the language. And yeah, I actually had a spouse and she did a good job being there and supporting me. It's just kind of this invisible thing that is happening, that is impacting people, but we are not talking about it. It's just happening, like this is what it is. Like, you are giving birth in a new country. Well, this is what women do, right? Where you're designed to just have a baby. So yeah, sure. So it's going to be the same if you deliver it in Ireland that if you deliver it in South Africa. Well, technically, yes. Emotionally, no. How far am I from my costume, from the different relatives that I may have around me to support me, from my, I don't know, day-to-day routines? Like, how different is it going to be if I deliver in South Africa or I deliver in the UK? So it is super important to understand that we have somehow normalized this impact, that it has somehow been even romanticized. Like, we're so lucky to just travel the world and have all these amazing experiences and challenges and so on. But we haven't really stopped to talk about these costs that is having, and that we are seeing, because we talk about burnout, we talk about depression, we talk about anxiety. We have thousands of research proving that expatriation puts at risk of depression and anxiety disorders. We have research that shows how expatriated couples have a higher risk of ending up in divorce, but we don't talk about it. We just don't.
Why do we not talk about it? Because it's better not to talk about it, or we're just not shining a light on it? What would you say the reason is?
You were saying something very important before too. It is shameful to talk about the challenges, because I am in this leadership position that is expected to have it all, to have all the answers, to know how to deal with things, because we've got the title, we've got the career, we've got the experiences, right? And if you look at it from this society perspective, they actually see these huge houses that they're moved into, and the ticket that is paid for, and the insurance that they have. So how come do they struggle?
Yeah.
What we see actually with the research that I have been doing is that this precise feeling of having to have it all, having to know how, having to manage things, just kind of pushes the time when they actually seek for help and support. So actually, a person that is not relocated and experience a challenge that could be related or not to global mobility, such as, I don't know, my colleague just relocated and I am feeling the pain of having to readjust to his absence. That person that has not relocated will seek support before the person that actually relocated, especially if it has a highly mobile career, which seems crazy. It's like, but this person needs it much more because they are living it on a very regular basis and they're being impacted. But it comes together with this belief that if I'm doing this, it's because I can do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be selected. Otherwise, I would not have been given the role. Otherwise, I would not have this incredible career. This is what they tell themselves. And this is what they listen from their society as well. Oh, come on. You're here for a reason. We chose you because you have these and that and that and that quality, because you know how to do these and that and that and that. And without really realizing it or doing it on purpose, they're just suppressing the impact that it's having. They're just leaving it for later, leaving it for when it can't hold anymore and just burst into burnout, depression, coping strategies such as the consume of drugs, alcohol, or even worse, cheating on your wife and ending up with a divorce.
I was wondering who needs to understand this more, like the people asking for people to go into like mobility programs, or the people themselves going into the mobility program, because the companies need to be aware of the impact on their staff, right? And I think even in my own life, I realized that had I have made a decision or talked about something earlier on, and there's reasons why you don't, again, shame, guilt, whatever.
Yeah.
The problem becomes more and more and more. And often you think you're going to solve it in your head, but you don't. Now, from a company's perspective, surely the incentive would be that I need to make sure that this person is 100%, not 100%, you can never guarantee that, but really comfortable. If they need something, then they are fully supported. And that's not that, okay, yeah, all their stationery is there, all their business cards are there. That's admin. It's about their, I want to say, psychological safety, the ability to talk to someone, and so much more than that. And if they don't, there's a bigger impact, because that person, yes, might be doing a great job anyway, but maybe they could do an even better job if they weren't holding on to these feelings. Maybe they're, if they got to express it, maybe they could be more creative, but they're going, right, okay, I need to keep everything contained, so I'm not going to think anything. I'm going to create as much safety in my own world, so I'm not going to, and I don't like the word risks, because we misunderstand risks, as in we don't take any risk, but there's a risk of not doing things as well.
Yes.
And so I think companies would need to maybe understand that of what they're actually asking for people, be sensitive to what people's needs are. And it's not been my world in terms of, I've never moved in terms of a company mobility scheme or anything like that. But my general impression, and you can help me on this, but my general impression is that once you're in the system, you're pretty much owned. You're like, okay, now you're moving like 3 years, you're going to go here, you're going to go here. You don't have a lot of choice even over your destination. And if you do, you get a choice of like 1 or 2 places that you can go to. But it's like you're in this big whirlwind for however long. And I don't quite understand, and that's just my outside perspective. It just feels like, right, okay, you're owned by the company. And when people say this work-life balance, and this is one of the sort of questions I'd like to talk about, because when I worked in the UK, I went to work and I came home. Everything around me was designed for me. When you move, you have to recreate all of that anyway. And oftentimes in the mobility positions that I've seen, a lot is asked of those people to go and entertain, to go to external functions, etc. I don't know if it just comes as part of that job. I'm not quite sure. And so you're like, well, hang on, you're there, and then you're caught in this work, and it's all, I want to say it's like you're selling your soul. And I am positive that a lot of people get a lot of great things from this mobility. It's not all downside. They get to travel the world, see different things, maybe land in a country that's more aligned to them, or there's other side. But just to focus on this side of things, it feels that you give up more than just your work life. You give up a good amount of your personal life. Is that accurate, or am I just seeing something from my solo view of the world?
Well, I do think that you addressed two very important things. First, you were asking me, is it something that should be intervened individually, like on the person? Should we prepare the person? Should we kind of warn the person or something? Or should we actually intervene on the company and have them being more prepared and more equipped to? And I do think that the two things are equally important. Like, first of all, what you're saying about this feeling of kind of selling your soul or being owned by the company is something that we call this invisible loyalty. And that sometimes, especially when we come from backgrounds that we're highly mobile before that, like I'm a highly mobile TCK myself. So I was highly mobile as a child during my developmental years. And somehow mobility just became part of my lifestyle, as you were saying, right? We just get used to it. And this is something that we do. This is what we do. We move, and we adapt with it, right? It's kind of, we don't really necessarily stop to think, is it something that I want to do, or this is what is coming? So this has always been that way. So I go with the flow, right? And it has its positive things. Like, we become very adaptable in many possible ways that you can imagine, and we develop great coping strategies, and we learn languages and all this, the positive things that were mentioning. But at the same time, there is this core idea that you were saying, this losing the sense of self that comes at a very high price if you're not aware of it. But what the good thing here, the good news, people, is that you can do something about it. Is that there is a way to actually identify what are those core values, what are those core things that are going to define you no matter where you go, no matter what you do. And that then will help you, as we were saying, to personally choose what's next and how you're going to do what's next, rather than just going with the flow and adapting and adjusting and just saying, yes, well, this is what it is, and then just oppressing and kind of keeping quiet parts of yourself that are not enjoying. And I think for the longest time, this is exactly what has somehow slowed down, first of all, the personal experiences, just as I was saying before. If they take longer to seek the support that they need, to express their needs and so on and so forth, it just takes longer for the companies to do something as well. Because it's like, well, you seemed fine and you didn't start complaining until, I don't know, year number 15. So had I known, maybe would have done something earlier, but you started complaining year 15. I don't know, relocation number 65. So it seemed like you had it. Maybe just, and then it's very easy to just move to other external variables. Or maybe you're just tired, it's like, no. It has a price from the very early years. Like we're studying the impact that it has on infants. So it has an impact on very early years. So it is just a matter of really fully giving in the space, as you were saying, the psychologically safe space to talk about it, to openly feel allowed to express what is going on without feeling shamed, without feeling guilty, without feeling inappropriate. Like having that space to properly talk about it is the first essential thing. And of course, it has to do with the company. Like the company has to have this sensitivity to honestly kind of create this space where the impact of mobility can be discussed, and the individual mechanism that need to be put in place can be expressed and verbalized. Because again, it comes down to the individual, and it's never going to be the same for one or the other. But there's certain things that are core to everyone, and it comes down to these human needs. We have the need for human connection. And you were talking about these exigence, right? To just rebuild your network. Well, the truth is that, and this is coming back to these different experiences that comes with those that are somehow relocated into a bubble, into a professional bubble, where everything is somehow limited and expressed and defined from the start. So perhaps you end up in a multicultural environment where the language is English, where you know a little bit or what to do, what not to do. Some norms are very explicitly shared, but many times part of the relationship, especially when they are families or couple that are relocated, a part of them lands in this bubble and the other part lands into the raw expatriation life experience. Like you're confronted to what you were saying. I don't speak the language. I don't understand the cashier. I don't understand the person at the bank. I don't know how to do my taxes. I have no idea how to go to the hospital. Is it private? Is it not private? Like they are confronted to a completely different reality. And there is where this risk in multicultural couples or in highly mobile couples becomes so high to divorce, because many times they do not go through the same experience of expatriation. Like they land in a completely different reality. And this is something companies can do something about. Like they can definitely help the transition of the spouses when they are being relocated as a unit. They can definitely help to create the bridge between the reality that the leader is experiencing at work and the reality the family is experiencing in that same location. Because many times there is this double role of leadership that happens in families, which is the leadership that has the leadership position in the company, and then the leader of the household, the one that has all the information and makes all the big decisions that has to do with the family, that has to do with teachers' meetings, with exams, with returning back home for the holidays, with how do we move around, how do we hire a person to help us at home, like anything that has to do with the household. And that creates a lot of tension as well. So my work actually is precisely to bring awareness of that mobility, how much is impacting leadership, no matter what leadership we're talking about. You can talk about household leadership, you can talk about professional leadership in a company. What we're talking about here is that when you are relocated, when you are forced to adapt and to have to just deal with new multicultural challenges, you're going to be impacted at the core of who you are, and you're going to be impacted in your relationships, in how you relate to other people necessarily. And your intimate relationships are going to be the first one that are going to notice it. But little by little, and this is where I come back to what you were saying before, it will end up impacting in your performance. Because there is something that doesn't escape anyone. Like when a person is having a real, intense personal situation, there everybody knows it. Then everybody notices it. It impacts in their capacity of empathy, it impacts their communication skills, and it ends up impacting their results as well. So why don't we go back to the essential? We are biopsychosocial beings. So shall we address those needs always and first? Before we train leaders to be good communicators, internationally trained, and being able to solve globally international big disasters?
Yeah, you said something very powerful there, because the focus is on what the company can get out of these people. Okay, now you're going to be presenting on stage or entertaining and giving the company message, etc. But I truly believe, and even more so doing what I do now, that people can feel, not necessarily through their language, yes, occasionally, but through their body language, the way that they show up, the tolerance they have to deal with certain situations. And that does show up a lot. I remember this one manager, he came into this company that I was working at, and man, he felt like he was a schizophrenic, because you didn't know what type of person you were getting. You would walk in, and he would beat you up, give you like not a physical slap around the face. He'd just say, "Well, you haven't been doing whatever," without really getting involved. And then he'd turn around and apologize, but then go, "Oh yeah, well, I'm doing this because of this." And you go, "Oh, okay." And then within the next breath, he'd beat you up again. And it was just like, oh, what's this? And at first, I took that on me. I was like, okay, I'm going to stay away from this guy. I never actually went and spoke to him and said, "Is everything okay?" Also, I think he had created a barrier. He had a door on his office. Not all barriers are physical. I think he was very good at putting up a lot of walls and stuff like that. I think if I'd have spent a bit more time, maybe I would have reached out to him. But I took it on what the impact was to me. I wasn't asking what the impact must have been on him and stuff like that. And I think if you go with that mindset and like curiosity about how is this for someone, not in an invasive way, but just sort of see, how are you settling in? And you touched on this part. I think, we often see the person in the office, but most of the time people in leadership roles, I would suggest, and I'm sure it's changing, are a little bit older. So they have got a family, at minimum, probably a partner or a wife or a husband. So the person at home is so important, and that they both need to support each other. That's generally how things are anyway. And then, I know it's, I've seen mobility programs before where they go, "Oh yeah, we'll give you 2 weeks. We'll introduce you to, like, this is your building. This is the committee there. You can go and see, these are the local shops. And yeah, this is a group that meets every Thursday." And you go, and from the outside, that you go, "Oh, that's great. That has nothing to do with you. That's just a tick the box exercise to say, oh, we've done a very good job." And with all of these things, and what I loved about one of the first things that you said, every situation is different. So I find that every person is different. Yes, we can put people into loose categories, but we shouldn't use those categories to define people. We can kind of go, "Oh, And I don't really necessarily like labels, but it's easy for people to understand. If you say, oh, it's quite introverted or quite extroverted, you go, oh, okay. But that doesn't mean that's that person, they won't talk to anyone. It's just this, you need to be aware, okay, they might need to be around more people that they feel comfortable with. It might be something to do with that. And what helped me when I moved, it's quite silly. I put it down to a few reasons, but I used to work in London. I had around about an hour's commute when I was in England. And on my commute home, I'd have a short walk and then a train journey. And that journey allowed me to decompress whatever and change my mind. So when I got home, I was almost like a different person. When I moved to Luxembourg, my commute time was 10 minutes. By the time I'd got in my car, I was back home and I hadn't dealt with all that stuff. And at the time, I'd come home and I was frustrated with the work, like it wasn't working. Partly, I believe the job that I was explained that it was going to be, they didn't really want that. They said that they wanted someone to create this role, make the team a bit more dynamic. But when I got there, they didn't want that. They just wanted a bum on a seat. They weren't open to ideas and stuff like that. So I felt a bit frustrated. And I couldn't find solutions for anything. I was very narrow in my thinking. I was like, so at the time I'd come back and my girlfriend would say, oh, you're being quite aggressive, not physically, but just in the way that I spoke. And I'm not like that in nature. I do get angry. I've got 2 kids, so anger's my second emotion right now. But she sort of said, oh, maybe you should go and see someone about it. And at first I was like, I was really sensitive about the whole thing anyway. And I was like, oh, okay. And because she'd said this and it felt quite out of character for me to be like aggressive. And also I knew that I hadn't processed it. I sought therapy. And I ended up finding a great therapist. We did cognitive behavioral therapy. The best thing I've ever done in my life. It was just so at first I'm quite open about myself and quite open about things, but I went there and it was just such a beautiful way to discover more about me. And one of the first things that she said is, people think that coming to therapy is a weakness. She said it's actually a strength. It takes courage to come and talk to a therapist about these things. When she said that, I reframed my whole idea of therapy. It wasn't that I was against it. I felt part of me was ashamed, especially, I know it's changing, but as a young man or a man, men don't tend to talk about those things, or they deal with it in a different way, go and have a beer, which never solves anything. It might solve it for a moment, but it's not that's the short-term game. You need to think about the other things. But going through all of that was amazing. Just being able to go and discover who I was, not why I was, but so much about myself, was so enjoyable. It was like, okay. And it didn't give me excuses for things. It just gave me some distance to understand, and gave myself some, not appreciation, but validation. Oh, look, you have changed everything. Yes, it is normal that you might feel these things. Yep, that work isn't okay. But it wasn't just that. It allowed me to see patterns in my behavior previous to that. Now, the patterns showed up, but in different areas. It wasn't always at work. Occasionally, yes, you could see the sort of a certain type of behavior when I felt insecure or certain things. But being able to speak to someone, just let it all go, was amazing for myself. And it sent me on this journey of understanding myself. And when you understand yourself, you have a lot more understanding of other people. That doesn't mean you know them, but you can see certain things showing up. And it helped our relationship 100% because I was a lot calmer. I had someone to talk to. I would caveat that to therapy shouldn't replace speaking with your partner. It's not you go there and you speak about it. You still need to speak to your partner. I would say that's something that I didn't quite get right. And because I'd spoken about some frustration, I didn't want to talk about it. I was tired after therapy. I don't think my partner would have fully understood some of those things that I've going through. And I didn't feel the need because I'd already spoken about it. And I think if you're not careful, you have to just explain stuff that's going on. And we're not always great at explaining what's going on in our heads. And I think just taking that time to explain things that are actually going on to your partner, and because I feel that your partner or your family is one of those, you don't have to protect it like as in, oh, there's no movement in it, but just you all need to work together in an environment that's quite alien to you. And yes, you might make friends, etc., but the people that are going to understand you or are connected with you or surrounded by you the most of the time is your family. And you have to give them a window into your world enough. You don't want to overload or whatever. And so it's about finding that balance between you, what's going on with you, but also sharing with your partner and things like that. And there's no guarantees for anything, but I think that ability to go and express things and I've always said this, a small thing in your brain can be absolutely gigantic. It becomes very big very quickly. Then what I found is that when I go to therapy, I would say something, and as the words tumbled out of my mouth, I was like, well, that's silly. Because something exists in your head and you're having this big conversation, you go, yeah, that's right. But when you say the words, it's like, oh, that's a bit strange. And it's strange how something that big can become small or insignificant just by expressing the words. So again, apologies for a big long ramble, but I think that part was really important for me in progressing and I would encourage anyone, I want to say especially men, because I think there is a stigma still attached to it, but really not. I think I talk about it quite a lot because I would like to encourage not specifically, I like to sort of say to men, yeah, you can do it. It's no shame. It's actually a very amazing skill to have, not only for myself, but for my partner, but also for my kids. And so don't just do it for yourself, do it for the people around you. Having a window into your own awareness is a great gift to have.
I agree. And I do think that it is shifting. And I think probably what scares people the most is the word therapy, is that idea that you have to dig deep in and go through all these different life experiences. I think there's still this idea of therapy being you have to go and relive every traumatic experience that you went through as a kid, or when actually something that I like to compare it to, especially because I work with high performance leaders, right, is that if you look or you think about any professional sport athlete and you look at them and their performance, they have a coach behind it. It's like they would never be able to do what they do without somebody looking at their behavior and their actions from the outside with a training that allows them to see what needs to be improved, what needs to be shifted, what needs to be adjusted in order to get them to the top performance. Because they are still the person that are executing the whatever sport they're doing, but they have someone with the expertise to look from the outside what is impacting them, how the shoes are going. Like maybe the sport athlete would say, well, I do feel unbalanced. Okay, but they have to say, okay, it's when you do this, so they have to be less slippery, or they have to be more X, or yeah, when you take this, you have these movements. So it's here, let's try to change the movement. And if it's not the movement, then we can change the racket and so on and so forth. Where I see that most intervention have been done on, so to say, and taking the same analogy, trying to improve the environment, right? And a lot of them have been, let's prepare them with more skills, like prepare them with more abilities to talk into international environment, let's equip them with whatever, with more money, with a car allowance or whatever. When it's like, okay, these are the equipment that most probably have an impact to a certain extent. But then what about what has to do with the person? With what the way they're moving, with the way they are reacting, with the way, and for that, you got to a very important point. They need to know themselves. They need to feel themselves. They need to be connected. An athlete has no doubt that they need to know and be connected to their body 200% to be able to perform. They have no doubt. Like how much they sleep, how much they eat, where they go, how they're being impacted, the messages they're sending themselves, everything is going to have an impact on their performance. Why aren't we doing the same thing with leadership? Why aren't we doing the same thing with household leadership? Moms, dads, why? Why are we not? If it's exactly the same thing, coming back to the initial conversation, we're talking about human beings. If they are impacted on a sport performance, they're going to be impacted on a cognitive performance, let alone in an emotional performance where you have to deal with another human being. And I'm taking kids now here because they're the toughest, because their amygdala and all their emotional areas of the brain are not fully developed. So you're very much triggered by the absence of the response you would like to get. But let's just be honest here. There's so many adults that have no emotional skills, no emotional regulation strategies that will confront you and put you in situations that are as difficult. And we're training leaders to be, kind of robots. I love this trend that there is online lately. Like, let's humanize our interventions. We have a humanized leadership program. It's like, so were they not for human before? Were they kind of for robots, or what was it for then? And actually, if you look at them and what they were asking them to do and how they were asking them to perform, it actually closer to what you would be able to ask ChatGPT or Gemini than what you're actually able to talk and to expect from a human that is going to be experiencing all these human challenges that have to do with human relationship, that have to do with body physiological challenges, and so on and so forth. And something I really like about our conversation when we first met to agree upon this little conversation, right, was how you were highlighting that many of those leaders look very cold and very distant, and that how you would think that this is insecurity, right? And that so many other people actually see it as arrogance and on the contrary, like self-confidence and so on. And probably the two extremes are true at some point in their performance, meaning that there are some points where perhaps they feel very secure and very sure of what they're doing, but it is the level of overwhelmness, is the lack of self-respect and fulfilling their internal needs that will take them to this roughness. Because as we were saying before, once your brain is overwhelmed, you're not in what we call this choice mode. You cannot choose your reaction anymore. You are in what we call survival mode. Survive. It doesn't matter how. If it's being the tough guy, then that's the tough guy. And that's it. You don't question yourself anymore because you don't have the headspace to do that. Same with insecurity. Most probably there are some moments where this insecurity that you perceive when they put up this facade, right, may be actually the reflection of a real insecurity. But what created that insecurity? As you were saying before, if you don't come in with this genuine curiosity and human approach to, hey, it doesn't matter that you're my top leader, I still see you as a human. Are you okay? You just relocated, your mom is in hospital, and your wife just had a baby, and you guys are not sleeping at night. Is there anything I can do?
Yeah.
Human to human.
Yeah, and I think, that human part is the way you described it is, we seem to expect a lot from people almost in a robotic way to switch off emotions, to switch off or detach from who they are. And, that shows up in other ways, in illness, in resentment, in disagreements at home, because you the more you disconnect from yourself, you're dealing with we always sort of say symptoms rather than the root cause. And if you can find what the root cause is, then the symptoms pretty much go away on their own. And if you just fix the symptoms, another symptom's going to come up.
Exactly.
And I think, all of this, I think from a company's perspective, they need to understand they're asking a lot and that there's a human behind all of those decisions. And it's going to impact them on a human level and understand what that actually means. But also for the person themselves, just really to understand that they are human and that's okay. And in your example, those people have been given an opportunity, and maybe that pushes out the timeline that they actually raised that. That's when you were saying it, I was like, yeah, I can understand that, because they think, oh, I've been given this extra promotion, I've been given this place, and it's the thing is, it's done consciously but also subconsciously. Oftentimes there's a big note, oh, so and so is going to relocate here to do this position. So it's like you're being forced with this big shiny headline that you're going to take over this position, and then that must come with some feelings of, I don't know, insecurity or feeling that, oh, okay, I've got to do a good job, so yeah, I can't really complain because of this and this. And it's not about complaining. I think it's just about connecting and understanding yourself and see what's going on, and talking about it with the right people, whoever that is, and and someone that can truly understand you, not a tick the box person. Just go, oh yeah, I met with him twice a week for a month and now we're done. But someone that can actually hold a mirror up in the kindest way, in the way that suits you the best, and that can say, okay, look, this is the stuff going on. And I think, yeah, if we looked at things from that human perspective, I think that would go, yeah, a lot further. As you were talking before, the word home pops into my head, and I wanted to talk about that. I know I'm conscious about time, but home must be one of those weird subjects. So again, I'll just bring my own experience. Even when I moved to Luxembourg, home was England for me. And then it started shifting. So I got married, we had kids, and then you're like, okay, so Luxembourg's home or is England home? I was like, and then when I just came back from the UK, and then I was saying, oh yeah, when we go home, and I was like, I have to explain what home is to other people, because home is here in Luxembourg, and it shifts, and it doesn't happen just on one date. It's not, okay, because I've moved country, now it's home. It's a feeling. It's where your base is. Now, why I say that? Because even for me, that was a little bit confusing. Now, I've just moved from one country to another. With someone that is constantly moving, as in every couple of years, etc., what does home mean to them?
So home is an experience. It is not a geographical location anymore. And it is a feeling that you actually learn how to identify. Again, when you're connected to who you are, you're connected to your needs, you're connected to your feelings. And far too often, many people that are experiencing all this constant relocation are unconsciously switching off their internal connection and their feelings as a survival coping strategy. It's like, if the emotion is overwhelming, better just suppress it, and then I just be able to keep moving on, right? And when we do the work of reconnecting precisely with these inner feelings and with how you experience things, you realize that global mobility brings with you this ability to connect with experiences rather than with places necessarily. And before, you were just raising something that is super interesting, and is that global mobility has this opportunity for you to experience your life in different geographical location, and to see what each geographical location gives you that makes you feel at home. What experience makes you feel at home? Like for me, the water of a river flowing, that makes me feel at home. And that river can be in any geographical location, but this is something that makes me feel at home. Is it because I was born next to a river? Is it because I have lived in the mountains for a while? I don't know. But what I know is that this hits home for me. This really makes me feel at home. And whatever I'm next to a river, there is this sense of peace. But again, we're talking about a feeling. You want to go back home. So if the experience of going back home for you, it is what happens when you're geographically relocated. If we worked on what does it activate when you are physically relocated, what happens in that new geographical location? Many, many times it has to do with the sense of calmness, with a sense of non-alert, with a sense of belonging. And this is why it is so important to make people identify what makes them feel at home, what makes them feel that they belong, what makes them feel that sense of calmness. But you will be surprised how hard it is to start working with those leaders that don't even know how to identify that feeling, because it's been so long that they had ever experienced this calmness, this connecting with themselves, that the first question when you present it like that is like, I don't know, like calm is when I shut my eyes and the phone is off and I have no meetings. And I was like, yeah, well, it might be something else. Like let's try to find that feeling, and let's try to find what makes you feel that way, so that you can take it, you can transport it with you wherever you go, so that you can go there whenever you need to go back home. Because there are different ways of hitting home, of having that sense of belonging. And when we talk about work, because we're here talking about leadership, specifically at the work position, right? It is incredible to say it that way, but we spend 80% of our life at work. The percentage is crazy, but we spend a lot of part of our life at work. So if we could just try to make it that space where we feel at home, where we feel safe, where we feel calm, where we feel free to express our needs, where we feel fulfilled and supported, well, that would have a huge impact on our performance and on what human will be able to do. Because what we know from neuroscience is that when your brain is in this calm mode, in this completely accessible to every single part of your brain mode, well, your ability and your capability just multiplies. Because you're not fighting any big, terrible lion. It's that you are honestly and 100% just connected to all your potential. So I truly believe that it would be very important to consider that if we want to have innovative and creative, and most importantly, sustainable leadership positions, we need to hit the core, which is their own well-being, which is understanding what are their needs, hit whatever they need to be at the full potential. Because when we support that, that's the investment for the sustainable leadership, empathic, communicative, assertive leader that we are training with the wrong tools, approaching it from the completely wrong angle from my perspective.
Yeah, I love that, because it comes back to the person and what they need. And I was thinking even about my job. So I've created my world very much as I wanted it, and it's my own company, it's my own business, but it allows me the freedom and flexibility to move, to take a laptop and be anywhere, to pick up my kids when I need to. If they're sick, I'm free, I can change things around. And with that comes this amazing amount of freedom and creativity. Sometimes I lose it because I get caught in the day-to-day, but at any point I can go, okay, and I can take myself off, or especially in the summer, I can go and sit out here. I've got a lovely terrace that overlooks fields, and just doing that changes something. I've often said this, we, especially as sort of solopreneurs and stuff like that, people building their own businesses, there's a ton of people out there that will help you build something that tell you how to build a business, and you've got to post like 7 days a week or whatever. And that's fine, but you can get caught in that. If you can go and just go for a walk or go and do something, find your space where you can have calm, then basically, you might come back and go, oh, well, it's not 5. I need to go over here and do something else, some other way of doing something. So it actually it has a bigger impact if you can create it. But from a bit, I was thinking when you were saying, companies often put even more pressure on the people landing in the new place. They've got to deliver. And I think that is also reflected by the person trying to mirror that back. Oh, I've got to deliver. But creating that safe space would be, much more beneficial in the longer term for building that position, building the company, and actually getting the results that the company want from that person.
Exactly. But I do think that this is the main shared goal. Like, the professional wants to perform, the company wants the leader to perform. And let's address the person that we're asking to perform with whatever they need to be able to be at their full potential.
Yeah, good. I think that's an amazing place to end. I think there's so many questions. What I loved about this is that it's about humans. It's about connecting with people, understanding that ripple effect. It's not one thing, one size fits all. There are certain things going on, but there's a lot. You've opened my eyes to a lot more that can go on. And I'm going to give a lot of thought to what we said. So maybe we'll do a round 2 and I can start asking some more questions. But for today, thank you very much for your time. Where should people find you if they want more insights from you? Is LinkedIn the best place, or you have a website? Where should people find you?
I do have a website. I have www.expat World Psychologist website, and we are very, very soon launching Emigra Leadership as well. And we are having this opening session that is happening on Friday at 2 p.m. And you were asking before that question, and of course, there are many leaders that come to me directly when they're hitting these very challenging moments, as I was saying, in a relationship or in a professional challenge. But I also encourage companies to come to me. I think I am moving towards this much more preventive approach with Emigra Leadership, where we're going to be having those preventive packages as well to support leadership that perhaps are going to be relocated or that are just on the onboarding program, and to start acknowledging and preparing both CHRO and HR departments on how to approach the impact of global mobility, and most importantly, to give these very highly demanded leadership position the support and the guidance that they need to be able to, as we were saying before, first of all, understand themselves, to be able to support themselves. And there is something magic that happens, Colin, is that when the leader is performing from this place of self-respect, self-acknowledgement, everybody else follows, because that's what the leader does. They set the example.
Yeah. Well, very powerful words to end on. So for today, fantastic. Thank you. I will repost this and I'll link to the links that you've mentioned as well. I actually invited a lot of people from HR, so hopefully people from HR were paying attention, and because I thought it wasn't just aimed at founders and CEOs, it was aimed at the people in HR that can have an appreciation for the things that we're talking about today. But for today, fantastic. You've opened up my world. I've got questions I'm going to go and ponder, and we'll be in contact again.
Thank you so much for this space, Colin. It was a wonderful conversation, and I really hope that it has agitated some minds towards this change that I think needs to happen one step at a time.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Karina. Bye.
Bye.